Now, the Psalms can help with our emotional health because they're raw and honest, and they give voice to emotions that are often difficult for us to articulate.
This is Mission 66, taking you through the Word of God from the ministry of Bible teacher and pastor Dr. Luis Sayao. In partnership with Transworld Radio, Mission 66 is produced and heard around the world in several languages. Let's hear from our teacher John Matthews and his co-host Esther Sasulu as they start us off today in our survey of God's Word.
We continue our journey into the Psalms today, arriving at Psalms 30 and 31, written by David. Well, our teacher John Matthews is here to lead us with the theme, Joy in the Morning.
Thanks, Esther, and a very warm welcome to this latest episode of Mission 66 as we dip into Psalms 30 and 31, and we're going to find that these two Psalms they're deeply personal, actually, because this is David pouring out his heart right in the middle of some pleasures in life, but also mixed with pain. So let's start by reading Psalm 30 in its entirety. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and have not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. You've brought up my soul from Sheol. You restored me to life from among those who go down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O you his saints, and give thanks to his holy name. For his anger is but for a moment, but his favour is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. By your favour, O Lord, you made my mountain stand strong. You hid your face. I was dismayed. To you, O Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I plead for mercy. What profit is there in my death? If I go down to the pit, will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper. You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever.
Yeah, John, I really do. I see what you mean about David's situation, because it seems that he goes from the mountaintop and then to the valley. You know, he utters prayers like, "Oh Lord, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me, and you've brought up my soul from the land of the dead." You can tell that he's being healed from this place of being unwell.
Yeah, and we don't know the exact situation that he's been in, but some who study the Psalms believe that this may have been written, this psalm, after David had sinned by calling for that census to be made, and it didn't find favour with God because it wasn't part of his will, and then there was a plague that was sent by God upon Israel because of David's action. But then David made this sacrifice on the threshing floor, which is described in First Chronicles, and that sacrifice then halted the plague. So when David says he was healed, he may himself have contracted that plague, that illness himself, along with the rest of the Israelites. The account doesn't say it, but it might have happened.
Yeah. Well, we see that he does give credit to God for being the one that heals him. You know, I do wonder if in this day we can rely on God being that great physician. And I say this because there is this ongoing thought or feeling that people think God doesn't heal in the same way that he once did.
Yeah, well, one of the names of God is Jehovah Rapha, which means the God who heals. God hasn't changed his name, by the way. And so that means that regardless of what people think, God is able to do whatever he wants. God can heal, and he does heal in response to prayer sometimes. Why he heals sometimes and why not others, we don't know. But we know that reading through the Psalms, it has this therapeutic effect on us. And so God is able to do all things. And I'd be very suspicious of people in churches and mankind who say God doesn't do this and God doesn't do that. God can do what God wants to do and can and will when the time is right, and he knows that the time is right.
Mm. Can you imagine the many times that God really kept us from going through circumstances that could have affected us badly? I mean, consider the times he may have protected us from accidents that perhaps could have really caused damage, or in some cases, helping someone from not contracting a deadly disease. I mean, God has shown up for us maybe in ways that we don't necessarily see.
Yeah, I'm sure one day, Esther, we will in heaven look back, and even if it's relevant to look back, and I'm pretty sure perhaps we won't be looking back, we'll be looking forward and up at that stage, but maybe we will have some revelation of all that God protected us from, and I'm sure it'll blow our minds to think how many situations where his loving arms have been around us, where he's been our fortress, where he's been our family's fortress. And as tough as circumstances may get in life, how he's protected us from so much more. And God only allows experiences which he can use for good, even bad experiences. And then here in verse 4, Esther, note that David says, "Sing praises, you his saints." Now, just a quick word on that. A saint, what is a saint? Well, according to the Bible, it's a true believer in God, any true believer who's been redeemed by the saving work of God. So if you believe in Jesus for your salvation, in the context of what David is saying here, you're a saint. You might not look like a saint, you might not talk or even act like one. You may be a work in progress, as am I. But if you're holding on to Jesus as your Saviour, well then, here we go. It means that in the context of what David is saying here, you're a saint. Remember, a saint is someone that God considers to be so, not who man declares to be one.
Yeah, you really don't have to be someone who does all kinds of incredible miracles or measure up to some standard of perfection. God is the one who calls us saints.
No, that's right. And look, a saint in David's time was able to sing praises, so they must have been alive. So yeah, I completely agree with what you just said.
Now, John, here's the key verse from Psalm 30, verse 5. It says, "For his anger is but for a moment, and his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes in the morning." And this is, of course, the theme of what we're talking about today.
Well, look, let's put this verse into context, because it says here, weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. Well, that's not everybody's experience, right? This is David's experience in Psalm 30, verse 5. So let's be very careful that we don't generalize and say that this is what happens, because it doesn't happen for people. You know, people may weep when they lose a child or something terrible happens in life. They lose a loved one. They're suffering from depression. Joy doesn't always come in the morning. Really important to recognize that. But we know here that God is God, and he's slow to anger, and his love and his compassion and his loving arms and his desire for us to come to him, whom is the source of all comfort, is very real.
Well, I suppose you could say we see that in David's experience, because on one hand here, he talks about his prosperity, and he says that he would never be moved. But then right after that, he does share how he was dismayed when God hid his face from him.
Yeah, David feels that God had hidden his face, but God is always with us. So I think the key point there is that David feels. The reality is that God is always with us. And what happens is then God turns his mourning into dancing. And so the feeling changes as he sees God. But it doesn't mean that God is any less right or perfect, no matter how David feels. And God promises to step in on behalf of those who call on him. Psalm 117 tells how people call to God in their troubles and he saves them. Now, Psalm 31, also written by David, is a lament, and it's a situation where he finds himself suffering, and here he's pleading for God to come quickly to his rescue. This is Psalm 31 then. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness deliver me. Incline your ear to me. Rescue me speedily. Be a rock of refuge for me, a strong fortress to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress, and for your name's sake you lead me and guide me. You take me out of the net that they have hidden for me. For you are my refuge. Into your hand I commit my spirit. You have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God. I hate those who pay regard to worthless idols, but I trust in the Lord. I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love, because you have seen my affliction. You have known the distress of my soul, and you have not delivered me into the hand of the enemy. You have set my feet in a broad place. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eye is wasted from grief, my soul, my body also. For my life is spent with sorrow, and my years with sighing. My strength fails because of my iniquity. My bones waste away. Because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbours, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I have been forgotten like one who is dead. I have become like a broken vessel, for I hear the whispering of many, terror on every side, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. Make your face shine on your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. O Lord, let me not be put to shame, for I call upon you. Let the wicked be put to shame. Let them go silently to Sheol. Let the lying lips be mute, which speak insolently against the righteous in pride and contempt. Oh, how abundant is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, and worked for those who take refuge in you, in the sight of the children of mankind. In the cover of your presence you hide them from the plots of men. You store them in your shelter from the strife of tongues. Blessed be the Lord, for he has wondrously shown his steadfast love to me when I was in a besieged city. I had said in my alarm, I am cut off from your sight, but you heard the voice of my pleas for mercy when I cried to you for help. Love the Lord, all you his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but abundantly repays the one who acts in pride. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord.
This is Mission 66, and I'm Esther, your host, along with our teacher, John Matthews, as we've just read Psalm 31. And you know, John, something that really strikes me, right? When we cry out to God for help, I think we want what David states here in verse 2, rescue me speedily. And I cannot tell you the many times I found myself in situations that were quite difficult, where I cried to God and said, Lord, please come through for me immediately. But, sometimes it doesn't quite happen that way.
No, and very often it doesn't, does it? And perhaps more often than not, actually, Esther. And the reason for that is that God knows the times. He knows that he can bring good from bad, and his time is different to ours. And very often when God delays an answer, it's for an infinitely good reason that he and he alone knows about. And we may say, look, where was God when this happened? Where was God when I was going through that? And then we think about his own son being tortured to death on the cross. And Jesus himself says, doesn't he, why have you forsaken me? Where was God when martyrs were being burnt at the stake? And it just allows us an insight to a different kind of understanding and wisdom altogether. To us, with our very limited understanding and us locked into our human timescales, God may seem distant, but he's not. We may feel that he's distant, but he's not. He knows everything that's going on. He understands our fallen feelings that come and go and rise and fall. And sometimes they fall and they stay low. And we stay in the midst of depression and anxiety. He understands that. It's a product of our fallen nature. It's a product of sin. And yet he is so able to lift us up from the miry pit and wrap his loving arms around us and in the right time deliver us in a way that we can't imagine.
And I'm so grateful that we have a God that we can rely on to help us through those troubling times. And, just reading this psalm, we see that David seems to be beset with all sorts of plots and schemes against his life. This is why he's crying out to God.
Yeah, that's right. We read through Psalm 31 and we see that David's enemies here are spreading what he describes as a net for his feet. They're trying to catch him. They're trying to upend him. And they're whispering to each other as if to catch him in some mistake that they can use against him. And that's a very similar way to how the Pharisees treated Jesus, wasn't it? Looking for a way to catch him out. Always described, weren't they, as watching him, even inviting him to their banquets. But their main reason was to try and entrap him in something he said that they could use to discredit him.
And isn't it so relatable how David kind of bears his soul to God? I mean, he's very upfront about his feelings and his emotions because, we read one moment he's in despair, but then very quickly he's back to praising God. I mean, it may seem like a bit of a roller coaster, but this is how our emotions can very often behave.
Yeah, that's right. And, we are all a different and beautiful array of different characters, and some express emotion more readily and more easily than other people. There are those who find it really difficult to do that. Maybe that's the example that's been set to them growing up, hiding their emotions, hiding their tears, claiming that everything is fine, hoping that everything will work out. Sometimes you hear this expression, don't you? You just need to tough it out, whatever that means. It's a ridiculous thing, really, to say, because toughing it out often means suppressing things and hoping that the good feelings will return, and then you end up just living for the good feelings and never dealing with those dark and low feelings. And when you suppress something, they're still there, and they will come out at some point. So we need to deal with all our emotional life. And, what we're looking at right here, and you hit it there with the question, we're looking at what is a healthy therapeutic approach here. He's allowing those emotions air. And we need to do that. Those emotions that we push down, they need to come to the surface. And they will come to the surface if we push them down in ways that we perhaps don't want them to. So expressing what's inside of us, allowing our inner life to be seen and aired, is so important. He allows his tears to flow here when sad. He allows his heartfelt expressions and words to be released, to be said, to be heard. And when he does that, he's simultaneously acknowledging God's sovereignty over his life, saying, look, I don't even understand these feelings. They're doing my head in, God. But I know you're in control, regardless of how all over the place I feel. And that's the impression you get when you read some of these Psalms. High to low to high. And what does that describe? Pretty much us. So David is no different to any one of us. And he perceives God as somebody who's not aloof from us, far from it. He sees God as God is, as somebody who can not just deal with our hardest and toughest emotions, but actually as somebody who suffers with us. Jesus was well acquainted with grief, so much so that he was described as the man of sorrows.
You know, just thinking about my own personal experience, I found that it is possible to experience this great sadness or grief or whatever it may be, and still be in gratitude to God for who he is and for what he continues to do in my life. And, you know, it's not necessarily that I'm thankful for the trouble that I'm experiencing, but I am thankful that he's with me in the trouble. And that is true for all of us who call upon the name of the Lord.
And there comes a day on our spiritual walk when hopefully we understand what Paul means when he talks about, I know the meaning of joy in every circumstance, whether I'm, what does he say, in prison, whether I'm shipwrecked, whether I'm... Paul in the New Testament moves to a stage where he's not defined by the things that happen in his daily life. He's defined by something far deeper, far higher, far more eternal than all of that. And that's, look, I'm nowhere near that, but it's a hope that one day I will be. And our journey of faith, if we give it to God, it moves us along that place. And, you know, it's right that we allow our tears to come out. They're therapy for the heart. God doesn't expect us to have a smile on our face during calamity. As Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble. But he also says, I have overcome the world. There's a bigger picture. You know, the reality is mourning and joy are part of everybody's experience. And God does heal and he can heal. But sometimes he won't. And David's Psalms, they show us that we are going to face difficulties, but God is present. Where is he present? Somewhere at a little distance from us? No. He is present in the middle of our pain. In the middle of our pain. And if we allow him, he will use even this thing that we wish we had never experienced, and we wish it would go away and never come back. He will use even that horrid pain for our eternal good, to draw us to him. We may never understand the pain this side of eternity, but he promises not to waste it, and he empathizes and sympathizes and feels our pain more readily than even do we.
Well, John, I just want to touch upon something you mentioned earlier about how reading the Psalms has this therapeutic effect on us. Perhaps you could elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, the Psalms are these poetic collection of prayers, songs, reflections, and they pretty much convey the full spectrum of human emotion, from despair and anguish to joy and hope. And they have this timeless appeal for their ability to resonate deeply, I think, with anybody who's facing challenges, seeking comfort, or indeed wanting to express their gratitude. And Psalm 30 and 31, they reflect the complexity of human experience. They alternate between suffering, trust, hope, and deliverance. You know, they can help the Psalms with our emotional health. They're raw, they're honest, they give voice to emotions that are often difficult for us to articulate. Emotions such as fear, anxiety. Some people are afraid to admit that they're afraid, or deeply anxious or depressed. Even David, the warrior king, frequently admits to being afraid. Sorrow is another emotion. Some people perhaps are reticent to show emotional sadness. Some men are taught foolhardily that real men don't cry. What is that all about? Real men do cry, and tears are relief for a troubled heart. Anger. Some of us are taught it's wrong to ever feel anger. Anger is a real emotion. It's often the way that we convey our anger that gets us into trouble, but anger itself is a real, valid emotion. Gratitude. Some people, have trouble saying a simple thank you. And here we see David willing to pour out his heart in thanks to God. And so Psalms like 30 and 31, they begin with distress and they end with hope. And they show how somebody can acknowledge fear and doubt, but then move towards a period and a feeling of stability, gratitude, peace. And the Psalms perhaps therapeutic as well, because they remind us that we're not alone, that we are not the only ones in the history of the human race who've suffered from the sorts of struggles that are described here, and we certainly won't be the last. And there's comfort in knowing that there is nothing new, in a sense, under the sun, that others through history have felt the same struggles and joys that we have. And for believers, the Psalms, I think, can be especially therapeutic because they reinforce the reality that God hears and he wants us to come to him, and he responds to our cries for help. Sometimes we can't even cry for help. They're groans of, God help me. And then meditating on the Psalms or even reading them and just going through them, there is a healing quality about them. And whether you believe in divine intervention or not, the Psalm 30 I'm thinking of particularly can instill a belief that change is possible and that hardships can lead to growth. So whether someone is a believer or somebody is not, reading the Psalms can have a therapeutic effect by helping them recognize and process emotions, find hope, and connect with what is a shared human experience.
This has been a great conversation, John, and I think this will be, I think in some senses, therapeutic to someone listening, understanding that you can express your emotions and God is there to hear. So, how should we summarize what we've learned in these two chapters?
Well, in Psalm 30, King David expresses deep gratitude for God's deliverance and his faithfulness, recounting how many times God has rescued him from near death and then transformed his mourning into joy. Verse 11 says, "You have turned for me my mourning into dancing." So David acknowledges as well that his pride once led him to feel secure on his own. How often that happens with us, isn't it? When things are going our way, well, we crack on, don't we? We push on. But then God hides his face, and perhaps we understand why he does that. For David to understand where his source of strength comes from. And David realizes his dependence on God. And then the psalm emphasizes the importance of praising God for his mercy and his steadfast love. And it reminds us readers that weeping may last for the night, but joy comes with the morning. And maybe you're thinking, well, joy doesn't come in the morning. But I think the point being made here is that weeping may well last for a season of life and maybe far, far longer than you ever imagined it would or even feel capable of dealing with. But the promise of God is that the valley, however long that valley may be and however long you feel you've journeyed through that valley, it will come to an end. It will come to an end. For those who rely on God, he will deliver you. And that's a promise. Psalm 31, then David seeks refuge in God during a time of distress. He's in the valley, calls God his rock and his fortress, and he shares very openly his feelings of fear, betrayal, physical weakness. I'm having trouble here, God. But at the end of all that confession, of all that stuff that he's feeling, he does remain steadfast in his trust. Verse 14, but despite all of that, it's not easy for me to say this to you, but I do trust in you, God, because you are my God, even though I don't know what you're doing right now. And so David highlights God's faithfulness to those who seek him and encourages them believers to stick with God. Even if he seems distant, he is not. And he says, be strong, let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. It's a double meaning in many ways, because he's with us. So we're not waiting for his prayer. He's with us. What we're waiting is for him to show us where he's leading us. So Psalms underscore reliance on God in times of trouble, plus the joy of that deliverance. So God is real, and he never, ever, not even for a moment, not even for a millisecond, using our time frame, our human time frame, not even for a millisecond does he abandon those who trust him.
Hope that you will join us next time. And our prayer is that the joy of the Lord will fill your heart. Now, if you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to contribute to the conversation or perhaps join our Mission 66 community, please do follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. You can search us at Mission 66, and you can once again comment on the episode and learn about upcoming programs. Well, I'm Esther, for John and our entire team, saying until next time.
As Mission 66 comes to a close, be sure to download your free study guide at mission66.org. Deepen your daily devotion with insights from each episode, and let John and Esther lead you through the scriptures. Get your study guide at mission66.org and be prepared for our next episode. There, you can also connect with us, ask questions, or donate to help Mission 66's worldwide outreach. Head to mission66.org. Mission 66 is made possible through Transworld Radio in partnership with Dr. Luis Sayao.